name is Allie Belzer. I am a licensed professional counselor, a specialist in experiential education, and a clinical adventure therapist.
My name is Amanda Reedy, a licensed clinical social worker working as a mental health therapist. We believe therapy is a great tool for healing. However, we want to demystify what healing can look like, as in our experience, people care for themselves in creative, intuitive, and determined ways.
Each episode, we will get curious about healing that is outside traditional talk therapy and deconstruct how healing can be a practice that is innate to who we are. Just as singing is to birds and making honey is to bees, it's just what we do. Let's get it. Hi all, thanks so much for tuning in. In today's episode, Amanda and I speak with Katie Asmus, a professional counselor and a pillar of the adventure therapy field. Katie is the owner and founder of the Somatic Nature Therapy Institute and specializes in trauma-informed nature-based therapy and rites of passage work. In our conversation with Katie, we discuss trauma-informed practice in the outdoors, the challenge of choice, and how we can weave rites of passage and soulful ceremony into everyday practices in our daily lives. Today's episode is part 1 of 2 with Katie. May what needs to reach you, reach you. Thanks so much for being here. Stay close. Just to start, can you tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So let's see. I am a psychotherapist of 25 plus years. I have been working out in nature with the natural world for over 30 years, first in outdoor education and then bringing that into therapy and therapeutic work. I also have a strong connection with rites of passage and weave that into all the work that I do, therapy, teaching, mentoring. I do wilderness quests and also do a global training in ceremony rites of passage. So those are kind of the main pieces that I weave together. I also, well, I said teach, but I have taught graduate students for over 20 years in nature-based therapy at Naropa University and Prescott College. And then I also do a lot of trainings for therapists, healers of all sorts who want to incorporate nature or somatic work and or ceremony and ritual into their work. And I do in-person trainings as well as online trainings.
So you really started in traditional psychotherapy, and then what led you, was there something that felt like was missing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so I actually started in outdoor education working in nature, and then I decided to go get a master's degree because I really wanted to help people deepen the experience that they were having in, like I worked for Outward Bound and other similar programs, and people would have, you know, big life-changing experiences, ahas. And so I just thought, you know, how can I really help people bring that even more into their life in rites of passage incorporation, bring it into their body, bring it into their life, take those ahas forward. And so I decided to go to graduate school and I went to Naropa University, which is a Buddhist founded school. And I studied somatic psychology with an emphasis in dance therapy. So I also was always working in a holistic manner. And then I ended up doing my graduate thesis on teaching adventure educators to recognize and work with trauma through somatic interventions. Because I was seeing, as I was doing all these pieces simultaneously, I saw many times at Outward Bound, people going on a ropes course, doing a rock climb, and getting to a place of freeze. You know, when we're outdoors and in experiential education and adventure therapy, adventure education, the idea is push people past their self-perceived limitations. And when people do that and are successful, the response typically is, wow, if I could do that, I could do anything. But what I was noticing was you can also push people too far past their self-perceived limitations. In outdoor ed, we call it the terror zone versus the learning zone. And so at that moment, I was studying Peter Levine's work, somatic experiencing, in my graduate studies, and Bessel van der Kolk, and all the people who now are well known. At that point, it was considered woo-woo because we didn't have all our scientific brain research and neurophysiology research. But I was learning all of that. And I just had this sense of, gosh, if everybody knew this, our whole world would be different. Our practice would be different. And really the sense of, we don't even need to know this in depth, but if we have a real understanding of the wisdom of the body, mind, and how we come to take on trauma, then that's also within that is the roadmap of how we heal trauma. And really at that point, I just wanted to share with outdoor educators, how do we not traumatize people more or re-traumatize them when they're going into kind of an overwhelmed state?
That was so beautifully said. And I think of the like pillar of challenge that exists in adventure therapy, and how challenge can be a part of trauma work. I'm curious how you do find that line consistently of like when to push, how to press the brakes, or when to hit the gas and like, no, go forward.
This is such a great question. I love it. So I will say my kind of perspective from the beginning has always been a strong value of choice. And when I actually moved to Boulder, Colorado to go to Naropa, I had been working outdoor ed, and I contacted a local ropes course facilitator to maybe work with them. And the first question he asked me was, if your student's up on the high ropes course and says, I want to come down, what do you do? And I think at that moment I said, check in. Are you sure? Do you want to take one more step? And he's like, nope, I would just put them down. He said, they said, come down. I put them down. And at that moment, they know that they have 100% choice. And that was the first time that was so conscious for me. You know, we had talked about challenge by choice for a very long time. He said, I call it the challenge of choice. So that totally opened my eyes. And then I started noticing was that in trauma, there is no choice. And so from there on, so many of the programs that I led, the whole course's goal was choice. What is your choice? Why are you making that choice? Is that your habit? Are you pushing yourself? What tells you it's a yes? What tells you it's a no? And I've come to sort of believe and see and understand that when there is choice, there's more safety typically to push ourselves further. So for me, I'm on really the far end of let's actually make it about choice and studying that and then the impact of that.
I love the wording, the goal is choice, not making choices so that you succeed or feel better, but the goal is choice. Switching the word from like, do this with me to I invite you to do this. And then providing options of like, if that feels like too much, bring it here. If you want to push yourself further, go here.
Yes.
You're reminding me like that act alone is like an empowering act.
Yes. So in the office, because I do therapy in the office, online, outdoors, lots of ways. But I always, my language has become so focused on choice. And when I teach, I often say, I'm even trying to get the permission of the unconscious, even more than the conscious mind. What I'll say is, hey, can I ask you a question? Or are you open to an experiment? But there's something about just even taking that moment of pause and asking, hey, are you open to something? It gives them their whole system a chance to sort of go yes or no versus, okay, let's try something, which can feel like something's being done to us. Like, are you doing something to me, or do you know something about me that I don't know? Are you reading my mind? And so I like to say, none of this is a mystery. And at any moment, if you want to know, ask me questions. There's no secrets. There's no mystery here. Again, knowing that they have choice gives a lot of permission and also more safety in the space to actually kind of take the next step.
If that's the choice worth celebrating, I'm thinking of all the times I worked at a ropes course too, and I was like 18 to 20.
Yeah.
And how the bravest choice sometimes is not actually making that jump to that trapeze bar.
Yes.
But even though that's what was most celebrated, was all the people who did the jump. But the braver choice for a lot of folks would not be to override their nervous system, to not be overriding what their body's telling them, but actually saying,
Yes.
I am not comfortable with this. And I am using my voice to say, I'd like to come down.
Yes.
And that is such a braver choice for some people.
Yes. I love that. I love that because then there's permission to and trust that, okay, I'm saying yes, but then if it's a no, then I'm still going to be able to pause. That you're sharing, celebrating the no or celebrating the vulnerable. And one of the things I talk about is, why are you making this choice? Because so much of our choices, especially in a situation like a ropes course, is what if I'm the only person that doesn't do it? So really looking at, are you doing it because you don't want to have negative social repercussions, or are you doing it because, right, like you said, it feels exciting, or I want to push myself? Maybe it's not a wrong decision if you do want to do it because you don't want to look stupid, but do that consciously and just be curious about it and have space for that.
I feel silly thinking about this, but I was a collegiate cheerleader, so there's a lot of risk in that.
Yes.
And I'm just was having memories of times of when do you have a hard fall, or it was a scary catch, or it was a near miss, and then a lot of times the answer is do it right away again before the fear creeps in. Before you start a story around every time I do this skill, I put myself in danger. It's like, nope, do it again. We're going to do it right away before you have time to build that skill. But I think that's how I do it, right? Where there are other people who say, give me 10 minutes. I will come back to this, or I'll come back to this tomorrow, or we're not touching this today.
Yeah. I love hearing that. Also, just finding your own way and knowing, if I do it immediately, that's going to help me. I know that works for me, and that making space for, what's each person's different way.
We've talked a lot about like challenge and choice so far. And something we've also been so curious about is rites of passage and how you've integrated that act or that intervention with like everything else that you do.
Yes. Oh, this is such a cool question. And I've never had this question with a similar bridge from talking about adventure therapy. And what arises immediately is that the way that we work with adventure in adventure education, adventure therapy, in a way is a rite of passage. So a rite of passage is the rite or the action or the ceremony. It could be intentional or unintentional. It's the action that marks a change from one part of life to another, or one identity, one aspect of our identity to another one, and that could be choiceful, not choiceful, developmental, etc. And the idea that in many, many cultures through time, there were, and still are today, very clear ceremonies or rites of passage going from adolescent to adulthood. And many earth-based cultures have and do send young people out on the land for days to weeks to months to survive. And in that time, it's really about finding one's own capacities and strengths, which brings us out on the other side feeling more confident, more clear, knowing that we can get through something hard. So in the work that I do, I say I help people create, or help their clients or their community create personally meaningful, culturally relevant ceremonies and rites of passage, whether that's, going from one stage of a program to another, or having a ritual beginning of the day, ritual end of the day, or a lot of programs I worked for would have solo reflection time, whether it was 1 hour or maybe multiple days. And so creating ways of intentionally helping people set their own intentions, go out to do the thing they're doing, welcome them back. And those are pieces that have just been in my life. And so coming into the therapy world, to me, it just made sense that this is a way that people really connect with and honor what is meaningful for them in their lives. Why would that not be a part of a place and a space where people are coming for growth and healing? I think about psychotherapy as a ritual and as in a sacred space that somebody's coming in, choosing to come in to grow or to heal, and coming in with their vulnerability. So personally, I hold it as a ceremony, as something sacred. And then I also, when clients are marking something big, whether they're coming through something, they're making a change in their life, I will often offer, do you want to do a ceremony with either in our session, or would you like to do it in your life? And I can help you think about how you want to craft it and who you want to be there. So for me, it's been a thread that's really kind of been in my life for a really long time. And I've woven in again to all the different places and venues that I've been a part of, both personally and professionally.
This is wrinkling my brain a little bit because I'm in wilderness therapy. Like, we have these big rites of passage and big ceremonies, and we have a solo, we have like midnight imbuing of intention, like these that feel really big and sacred.
Yes.
And
yes.
But to hear that it can be so interwoven in small acts, like, I'm a newer therapist, right? But since I've started seeing clients, I feel like again and again, the reason people come in is, or it's usually combined, like, oh, there's always something to do with trauma or attachment, and there's always something to do with transition. You're moving either from this time of life to a next, or the person you were to the person you would like to be, going from an unboundaried person to a boundaried person. No matter what, these are trying to integrate two ideas of what the self has looked like. And I've struggled, I think, knowing how to mark that, because I feel it in my body that it's such a big thing. And
yes, it is so true. Well, people come in, and I just think about loss. Very common reason that people come in, because they've had a huge loss, whether that's a loved one or a job or a divorce or something. And then with this loss, they say, who am I now? Or even a traumatic incident, right? That feels like I've lost my trust in the world. I've lost whatever that might be. So whether it's, from one identity to another, or just integrating a loss, there's so many things that people come in with that I think could benefit from conscious marking, right? And that's really what ceremony is. I like to say ceremony is saying yes to what is. And it's really honoring what has meaning to us. And when we consciously honor what has meaning to us, when we put words to it, when we take time to put our attention and intention there, it gives permission for us to feel more, for, the experience to move through us, so that we're not holding it in or kind of dissociating from it. So there's something about that process that really gives it space and breadth. And often I think about with ceremony, not always, but often there are witnesses. And so it's possible, of course, to do a ceremony solo, but traditionally we've done it in community. And so if it's just me there with my client, I'm the witness, or we think about who else supports you in your life. Let's imagine those beings just energetically here with you. And that could include humans, that could include spiritual support, that could include even your animals. And just feeling the care also gives permission for us to feel, right? To feel what we're having a hard time feeling, to also not feel so alone. But it really brings in the whole body in a way, also invites symbols for people to bring in their symbols. And this is why I like to say personally meaningful, culturally relevant, because I think there's no right way to do ceremony. And in the US, we come from such different cultural backgrounds that we don't have a lot of shared rituals or shared ceremonies. And so for me, also, it feels like it's like a creative process to craft ceremony that is really meaningful to the person. And for me, it's like a coaching or a facilitating process where I start by introducing, do you even want to do this? What are your associations when I say these words? What comes up? Because it can be loaded if people have negative religious or spiritual experiences in their life. It can, or none, then there can be a lot of sort of, this is what it looks like. This is what, like, projections that come up. So kind of unpacking what even comes up as I say that, and really then talking about, like I said, just marking something. And I say, like a birthday, that's a ceremony, a honoring of passing another year with the sun, with the round of the sun. And then if somebody wants to do it, we just start looking at, well, what are you marking? And what symbols might you want to bring in? Is there an action? Do you want to speak something? Here's how we can create intentional space. How would you like to do it? Here's how I like to do it. So it is an art, I think, of really bringing it in a way that invites people into it and also creates a really wide open space of what that can look like.
I think culturally, we're much better at celebrating or bringing ceremony into things that we consider are celebration worthy, versus we really have a lack of ceremony around witnessing our own pain and allowing other people's to see it. And there's that Sumat Kid quote from the Book of Longings where she says, every pain in this world is asking to be witnessed.
I love that. Beautiful.
We can't quote that book without crying.
I can't do it. I just had a baby, so I can't quote anything without crying. But I'm just thinking, with my clients, when we experience grief, and I hear so many people being like, well, I feel like I've felt what I need to feel. I've come to terms with how things happened and with this loss, and we're not going to have a funeral. We're not going to have a ceremony around it. And then I think it just lives within you for so long, asking to be seen by yourself, really acknowledging what that felt like, and then wanting, it's asking to be witnessed by those who support you or love you or your community.
Absolutely. Well, I always say 90+% of what we need is empathy and attunement. And when there's enough empathy, accurate empathy, attunement, compassion, then we feel the things that we need to feel, because it creates a sense of safety in our, unconsciously more than consciously, organismically, which is what therapy is, right? And is what attachment is all about, is about that accurate empathy and attunement. And I think about always experiences where we're in like a near miss car accident, or we've had a big loss in our life. We walk in the door and our friend or our partner goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're okay," or "How are you?" and gives us a big hug. And then all the tears come. We start like the bawling can happen that we've been holding in, that we may have not even known that we've been holding in, because at that moment there's enough safety, there's enough with the witnessing that lets our
Mm-hmm.
system know we're safe to feel what we need to feel. And so,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, I think that's profound. What you said is the need for witness of our grief in a way to give us permission, organismic permission to really go there and to feel the things that we need to feel and to grieve in the way that really our whole body, mind, souls really need to grieve. There's a great book, Transitions by William Bridges, who is a psychologist, and he frames therapy as a rite of passage and also talks about so profound that in every life transition, there is a grief, there is a loss. So in anything, even that we choose that we think is good, being partnered, having a child, if we choose that, changing jobs in a way that we're excited about, no matter what it is, we are giving up parts of ourselves. We're giving up aspects of our lives to say yes to this new thing. And he really, that was when I read that book 25 years ago, it hit me really strongly. Oh, we need to grieve even in our celebrations. And it makes space when we can really feel the sadness of what we're letting go of or losing, or, maybe just choicefully letting go of, then we make space for the next thing that's coming in our lives.
When it's time to add ceremony into your life around something or add in some type of rites of passage, what do you see with your clients that give you that little clue that, ooh, I'm hearing this. I think something like a ceremony, ritual, rites of passage is what's needed here.
Yeah. I think there are some different ones and some key ones. So when in rite of passage, there's 3 critical stages, and one is severance or letting go. So letting go of the old way. One is the liminal, the messy middle, like, who am I now? I'm not what I was before, and I'm not who I'm going to become. And this is terrifying because there's no ground. And then the final stage is a completion or a accomplishment. And then it's called incorporation, bringing it into the body. So how do I really bring this new way into my body? And all of those stages are typically not simple. They're all, take a while. And so when I think about creating ceremony, often the ceremony is focused on one of those stages. It's either focused on the letting go, it's focused on support for the middle, or focused on the celebration and the incorporation. And so with the letting go, often if someone really is having a big loss, it might be really doing something that honors the grieving of that. Or if I hear my client just cannot move on, or they haven't been able to move on, maybe even for years from something, I might say, do you want to do a ceremony around this? And really work with the letting go that never got to happen. Maybe it was even something from 20 years ago. But it's like in what they're speaking about liminal, I think a lot of people, when they come into therapy, they're in the liminal. They're in that place of, okay, I'm not who I was, and I don't know where I'm going, or I'm in this middle ground, and I need help. I need support. I need guidance. I need some assurance that I'm going to be okay. And that is such a hard one for people because the liminal can last a long time and it is so uncomfortable. Most people just want to get to the other side. And I feel like in our world these days, we can medicate with a million different ways at every moment. So we're just like, how do we stop the pain? And so a ceremony of the liminal is really about, what do we do and where do we put our attention when we're in this scary, groundless unknown? And often that is a ceremony around asking for guidance, recognizing what are my strengths, what are my anchor points, who supports me, setting intentions, etc. And then ceremonies of incorporation, often when like if someone's graduated, I see a lot of graduate students when they graduate from grad school, we do a ceremony and honor what that's been. When people end therapy with me, we often do a ceremony looking back and recognizing the changes and what was hard and what they're proud of. And so when someone has accomplished something, and sometimes it's just like honoring it, acknowledging it, owning it, bringing it into the body, and or like in graduation, it's complicated because there's this excitement, this relief, this pride, but then on the other side is what next. So then it could also be a bridge of, okay, so you're completing this, we're celebrating, but again, incorporation, bringing it into the body isn't something that happens the next day because you have a piece of paper, right? That's something that actually continues to happen over time. So we honor both what has been and all the work that's been done, and then set intentions for what's next and how am I going to keep bringing this into my life, into my body, and master this new experience that I have taken on.
Like, how do you ritualize that or add intention? What are some things that are common in your practice?
Yeah. So one model I use sometimes are appreciations, resentments, regrets. And what that does is it also makes space for, again, the complexity of change. So what am I, disappointed about? What did I actually didn't get done that I intended during this time? And then also, what am I grateful for? What am I appreciating myself for? Who is there to support me? So she gathered stones that represented all of those, and then had different bowls where she just kind of named the different pieces and put them in. And then she had brought a particular rock that she had bought. It was like a special stone for herself that represented kind of strength and a stability and what she felt she wanted to feel like as a professional out there offering support to others, and recognizing that she was going from a student stepping into this role as a professional. So that was something simple that we kind of co-created. I had another client who she was her second career in life. So she was a little bit older, and she had thought about becoming a therapist for a long time and had sort of thought, well, is it too late? I already have this other profession. And finally just said, no, I've been thinking about this so long and it feels really authentic. And so when she graduated, she did this process of going out onto the land and finding a place that was, I think, a tree stump that was like a table, but also a kind of felt like a support or platform, and created a ceremony there with different natural elements, and really was gratitude for herself, for listening to herself, for taking the steps, for, being willing to be uncomfortable after, having built up a whole profession, and really did a lot of just speaking out loud, honoring. I think she did a letting go of some sort. I don't remember what it was that she let go of, but usually it's some combination of a pre-planned and spontaneity in the middle. So Malidoma Somé said something like, there's the technology of the ritual, the pre-planned, and then room for the spirit to move. I love that. So we really kind of get creative, and then I have my client feel into what is the way that feels really right for you. And then I also say, okay, we're stepping into this ceremony, and just know that if something comes up in the middle or occurs to you that you need to say or we need to do that wasn't in the plan, let it happen, because this is what we're doing. We're listening. We're letting this movement move through our body. And again, coming back to saying yes to what is, the most important thing is, it's like the choice thing again, but just to be authentic, even if it's just speaking what's in your heart. I think that's better than I'm doing this because somebody told me to read this poem and then do this thing. It's like, okay, maybe, but what's just like, what's in your heart, and how do you let that move through you, whether that's in words or writing or art or movement, because it really is an honoring of what's right here.
You're speaking to how like client led and individual led it is. And
Yes.
it's sounding like you just provide the space for them to like guide their own way, like what feels right. Which gives me so much hope, because what this podcast is all about is like for people who don't have access to therapists that are well trained in rites of passage, how
Yes.
can we provide this tool in a way that's accessible in daily life for people, like give them permission to engage with it intimately in their own lives outside of therapy. What are some first steps you would suggest to people who are trying to do that?
Well, I will tell you that I have a co-created, which I'll give you access to, and you can share with people on this podcast, a ceremony creation guide. And my
I just got so excited. I love a resource.
Oh, good. I love it. So my dear friend and colleague, Hoeatea Bryson, she was born in Australia, and she also is part Maori. And I know her from Naropa. She did the wilderness therapy program. And she and I have been doing this global ceremony and rites of passage global training for the last several years. And so as part of it, we made this 20-page ceremony creation guide that's actually out. It's on our website, but I'll give it to you. You can link it to your show notes too. And it really walks people through step by step creating your own ceremony. And so it starts with deciding what's the intention, because the intention guides everything, right? Why are you doing it? What's the point? And then the next step is deciding where and when, putting it in your calendar. And we like to say the moment you decide you're going to do the ceremony begins. So your whole like psyche starts sort of orienting toward that. Synchronicities start happening. You start noticing things come up in the world around your intention, or you have ahas. So by the time you get to the ceremony, it's not uncommon that even the intention is a little bit different, or you've already done some of the work around that intention, which is pretty cool. So the putting it in your calendar is really critical because it's like another commitment. It's okay, this is happening. This is when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is, who or what do you want to support you? Who's your community? And like I was saying earlier, that includes humans. It could include spiritual support, could include the earth and earth beings, animals, could include people, loved ones that have passed. And so when you know who is it that supports me in this intention, then you can also start thinking about, who do I want to be there? Do I want anyone to be at the ceremony? Or do I want to let people know that I'm doing it? I had a client once that we created a ceremony. She actually did it all by herself, out in nature. But one of the things she decided to do to bring in community support is to ask some of the people that knew her the best to write her letters about what they've seen in her and the strengths that they've seen in her as she's made some transitions in her life. So, who or what supports you. And then the other big piece is, based on the intention, what are the symbols or symbolic actions that I want to incorporate into this, that are going to mark the meaning that I'm bringing, mark the intention of the ceremony. So, are there sacred objects or gifts that people have gifted me that represent either their support or strengths of mine or something like that? So what do I want to have those things there? And based on the intention, is it a letting go ceremony? If so, how do I want to express that letting go? Do I want to burn something, bury something, put something in the water, etc.? Or if it's the liminal, what is my question that I'm holding, and how am I going to express that? Am I going to express that out loud? Am I going to create something that represents this? So looking at that piece. And then once those are really, we call those the pillars of what we're doing, of creating the ceremony. And then from there, other considerations are, how do I want to begin and end? So how do I create sacred space, or intentional, we could say intentional space? What's going to tell my body, my mind, that something different's happening here? And in ceremony, we call it a threshold. How do we step across the threshold from ordinary time to intentional sacred time? Is that a literal, like, stepping across a line, or between two trees? Or is it drumming? Or is it lighting a candle or burning something? And often a component of ceremony is sensory experiences, because the sensory experiences help bring us into the present moment again and get our attention in a different way. So often part of the opening of the ceremony is some kind of sensory experience. What has meaning to you here? Or do you want to bring in a prayer? Do you want to bring in a poem, a photo, etc.? I believe we could all do a ceremony any day, because there's always something that either we haven't really completed, or that we're in the middle of, or beginning. But for most of us, our life, the center of gravity of our life, is in one of those stages.
I'm getting very excited. You also mentioned cultural relevance, and something's coming up, or in like wilderness therapy. There's a real sticky hard point for me that we actually operated with a lot of indigenous practices. And while operating on private land with really affluent white young men.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just wanted to hear more about the social justice implications of rites of passage. How important is integrating your cultural identity, and where is that line between cultural identity and cultural appropriation when designing ceremony?
Yeah, well, so I can speak to this quite a bit. This is a really big part of our training that we do too. From the beginning, is looking at the difference between cultural appropriateness versus appropriation. And so one thing to start with is, when we use the word culture, or Hawaii and I, when we use this word in our training, we look at culture from lots of different standpoints. So that's, yes, our family heritage history, but it's also, where were we born? Where did we grow up? What are the experiences we've had? What are the what are the spiritual traditions that we come from? Because even in the US, right, the cultures of the New England are very different than maybe the cultures of the South, or the cultures of the Bay Area, or culture of the mountain town. There's a lot of diversity just in this country, of the way that people live, of their practices, their beliefs, and then not let alone people are from all over the planet here. So looking at culture very broadly, but a core piece of that is relationship. So what are you in relationship with? What have you been in relationship with? So somebody may have, been had relationship with a community of people that weren't their own culture, that they came from, their lineage, but they've been immersed in the practices in their community, with eldership, with mentorship, and have been studying practices. That's very different than if you say, oh, I saw this on TV that I should light some sage, and now I'm clearing the room. And we talk a lot about, what are the practices you're doing, and how did you learn them, and where did they come from, and what do they mean to you? And I mean, sage is a big one that there's a lot of conversation around. And I think with this topic, there's a lot of different beliefs and different ideas of what is cultural appropriation, what is not? How do we really work with honoring history? And I think about sage. Like, I've been living in Boulder, Colorado for 27 years, and the hills are full of sage here. It is very native to this space. In what I know in herbology, they use sage as a cleanser for the digestive system. Also, burning sage clears viruses from the air. So it's cleansing. And Native Americans do a ceremony called smudging. And I think that's something that people have often over the years in the US said, I am smudging, and what I have learned is that that is actually a very particular word and a very particular meaning and a very particular belief system that I don't do, but I do burn sage. And for me, that's not why I'm doing it. And often what I'll do is do it. And I just actually came to this through sort of spontaneously as a prayer when I was doing ceremony, is I go through kind of the chakra energy areas of my body with the sage and say a prayer like, may I have clear seeing, may I have clear voice, may I have clarity of heart, as I'm stepping into facilitation. So I think that's just a little bit of, I think, again, this is a big, big topic, but relationship is critical. What is your relationship with this? And being clear about that. Where did you learn this? What are you doing with it? What are you calling it? What do you think that you're doing? And really being in right relationship with our practices, with the elements, with the different things that we're incorporating. I'm so glad you brought that in. That's such a significant consideration and question.
Thanks so much for listening to That's My Therapy. As a general disclaimer, the topics discussed in this podcast are just one unique perspective, not prescriptive mental health advice. May you find healing where it finds you.
If you are feeling suicidal or in need of immediate help, you can reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988.